water. And penguins have a great torpedo shape. It's also excellent for holding in your actual body heat, having that high body volume to surface area ratio. Penguins float quite low in the water. If you're used to seeing a duck or a goose sitting on a lake, they float very high, but as a diving bird, that would be quite counterproductive for penguins. They're quite dense and quite heavy, so they're buoyant, but not fluffy. And to move through the water, they use their wings. But their wing is so highly specialized for swimming that, in fact, we call them flippers. But if you look at the bottom image there, that is the bone structure inside a penguin wing. And it's very similar to what you find if you carefully ate a chicken wing, for example, except in penguins, the bones are flattened and make a better paddle. Penguins are evolved from flying birds, and there used to be even bigger penguins than we have today. That's an emperor penguin on the left there, which is the largest species found, and it's about 3 feet tall. But there next to it is one of the fossil penguins found in New Zealand. And for a scale, here's a model from the museum in New Zealand of that bird. Imagine a whole colony of penguins this size. That would be a very intimidating place to visit. So these birds that we see today are highly specialized swimmers, but their ancestors were able to fly through the air. We're looking at an X-ray of a chinstrap penguin here, and I want to draw your attention to a couple of features. At the top center, you can see where the head is and the eye, with the beak kind of overlaying on top of one of the flippers. But look on the right-hand margin. You can see the flipper bones that go down towards the bottom corner. And look at the legs. One of the things we all love about penguins is that they seem to waddle. They've got these short little legs that they take cute little steps, and that's endearing. But when you see them on an X-ray, there's quite a lot of legs there. And what's really going on is that they have long legs, but most of the leg is encased inside the body. And this helps with streamlining for the hydrodynamics, and also keeps the body temperature contained. And if we look at a penguin in mid-waddle, you can see there's the knee just here, inside. Now, of course, walking is not what penguins do best, it's swimming. This penguin is swimming from left to right, and it's doing so by flapping its wings. Just like a sparrow does to fly through your garden, the penguin is flapping its wings to fly through the water. All the power comes from the wings. The webbed feet they have are just tucked in under the tail and used for steering. All the birds found in the world today are without teeth. But if you're eating seafood all the time, like squid, fish, and krill, which is a little crustacean like a shrimp, if you're eating that kind of slimy stuff, it does help to have something to grip with. And penguins have a lot of these little bumps on their tongue and the roof of their mouth. They're called papillae, but they're basically little projections that give them some traction on slippery food. The feathers on penguins are denser than almost any other bird in the world. If you've ever handled a bird, say you had a blackbird fly into the window of your house, or you've grown up on a farm and plucked a chicken or something like that, you will note that feathers will grow in tracts. There's a line of feathers, and then there's a gap where there's no feathers growing out of the skin. That's not the case with penguins. Penguins have feathers growing on almost all of their body with the same sort of density that mammals have fur growing, with two exceptions, and one is very conspicuous here, and that's that little slit you see on the belly. That's called the brood patch. And both males and females have this, and it's a spot that is unfeathered, and by contracting muscles under the skin, the bird can open that up, and it allows the egg or the small chick to nestle in against the bare skin of the adult. And that's great if you're trying to share your body heat with the youngins. If you had feathers on all of that, that's trapping your body heat inside, not sharing. So both male and females will have a brood patch. Look at the density of the feathers here. That's the skin along the bottom of the photo. that are tightly packed in, and a healthy penguin has feathers in such tight shape and well maintained that the skin never actually gets wet. These feathers prevent water touching the skin, which of course, if it did touch the skin, a lot of heat would be lost. And here's a close-up of the back of a flipper. They look like, these feathers just look like shingles on a roof. Penguins eat seafood, and they eat it underwater, so they take in a bit of salt water while they're diving. And to get rid of the extra salt water, they have a special gland called the salt gland, and it's located just above the eye. This is a skull of a penguin, and in the little trenches there that you can see, those are where the salt gland would sit. And this helps them get rid of the extra salt that they take in. A reminder, penguins are birds. I often hear people talk about penguins and birds as if they're not all the same, but they've got feathers. They even tuck their head under their wing to sleep sometimes, even if it looks silly because their wings are flipper. And penguin feet are fascinating because they're another spot that is not feathered. And so this is an area without insulation that can be used by the penguin to control its body temperature. Most of the time, that's to retain body heat. And so they'll minimize the blood flow into their feet so they don't lose too much heat to the atmosphere. But sometimes, standing on ice, of course, that's when you really want that. Penguins, like the emperor penguin, will even sometimes lean back and just sit on their heels to get their feet off of contact with the ice. But the penguins can also use their feet as radiators. They can flush a lot of blood through this uninsulated part of their body and lose heat quickly to the environment. And they want to do that on hot days or if they've been exerting themselves quite a lot. So it's a very, very valuable thing for the penguins to be able to control their body temperature. Now, one of the great things about penguins for tourists as well as scientists is that when you see one penguin, you see a lot of penguins usually. They are colonial. They like to hang out together. And so it's great from a scientific perspective. You get this great sample size, one spot, you can observe hundreds of nests. And of course, for folks like us who are going to just look at these marvelous birds, we'll get a chance to see more than just one or two. Now, I'll just run through some of the world's penguins. The number of penguins in the world is under a bit of dispute now. It's generally considered to be 18 species worldwide. But recent analysis from molecular biologists suggests that we might be 22 species, and that is not mainstream accepted, but it's headed that way. The emperor penguin here, the largest penguin, found only in Antarctica, and only in the far south, so I don't expect we'll get far enough south to see emperors. They're nesting in the wintertime, in the middle of the Antarctic winter. It's an incredible physiological feat that they can do this. And somehow they've managed to hire a publicist too, because this species has got all kinds of movies about it. Anarchy, marching penguins. It's a lot of publicity, but it's not surprising when you stop to listen to what they're saying about how amazing it is that birds are reproducing, breeding, raising their chicks in dead Antarctic winter. The other penguins that live in the Antarctic do not stay there. The emperor actually breeds them. In the sub-Antarctic, there's the king penguin. And we'll encounter these. Some of you may be on tours in Falklands, Malvinas, and you might see king penguins, which are nesting there. There are some in far south of South America, but they're mostly found on subantarctic islands, so not quite Antarctica, not quite the mainland. And then there's a group of crested penguins, and these are scattered in a variety of different places, mostly outside of Antarctica. This is the fjord-blue crested, that jungle penguin I mentioned before. It's found only in the southwest corner of New Zealand. And the erect crested penguin found only on a couple of islands south of New Zealand. The macaroni penguin, which does find its way into a little bit of the Antarctic. And this bird has no connection to macaroni da pasta. Its name comes from the ornate plumes on the head here. there was a slang term for Englishmen who spent some time abroad, especially in Italy, and they came home to England wearing the flamboyant dress that they had picked up. And often that was plumes in the hat. And as a slang term for them was to call them a macaroni. And for Americans who are, United States people who are familiar with the couplet from Yankee Doodle Dandy, there's a line that says, "Stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni." That is a reference to the same slang term for somebody dressing with a stylish hat with plumes. So that's where the macaroni gets its name. There's the royal penguin found just on one island south of Tasmania. There's the snare's crested penguin, one island south of New Zealand. And the southern rockhopper penguin, which does occur in the southern parts of Argentina and Chile, is also found in Falkland Malvinas. There's a northern rockhopper that has slightly more punkish hairstyle. That's found on islands further north in the Atlantic, like Tristan da Cunha. In New Zealand, we have the very odd-looking yellow-eyed penguin. And there's also the Waitaha penguin, which, as you note, I don't have a picture of because it's extinct. And it was only discovered about 10 years ago from the middens of early Polynesian settlers in New Zealand. And the Waitaha penguin wiped out about 500 years ago by over-harvesting as a food source. And it's the first penguin that we know of that humans have extirpated anywhere. The little penguin, Australians know this as the fairy penguin. New Zealanders also have them, and we call them little blue penguins there. But it's the world's smallest penguin. They nest in burrows. Some of you may have been to Phillip Island in Victoria, Australia, and seen the little penguin there. And then there's the chrome-plated cocktail penguin. Highly social, but not colonial. And the tempered penguins, sometimes called the striped penguins. This is the Magellanic penguin, and many of you will be seeing these birds tomorrow because they nest in Argentina and Chile. They nest in Falklands, Malvinas, and they are found in the southern cone of South America. Amazing birds. They're living in a very hot place. The summer temperatures can be quite high, and you'll notice on the face they've got some exposed skin. And again, this is for temperature control. The feathers work as insulation, so if you have some skin without feathering, it can be a great place to suffuse it with blood and share that heat with the atmosphere. And so the Magellanic penguins do quite a bit of that. They nest in burrows, which also allows for a little more temperature control and protection from foxes and skunks and armadillos and things that would like to eat the eggs. On the other side of the Atlantic, Africa has a single species of penguin, the African penguin, sometimes called black-footed or jackass penguin. The term jackass penguin is because of the call it makes sounds very much like a donkey bray. But the problem with using that term is that there are other places in the world where other species are called jackass penguins. So the official name is the African penguin. And there's also a penguin on the Galapagos, found off the coast of Ecuador. And this penguin is the only one that will allow you to win an argument in trivia over are there any penguins in the northern hemisphere? Because the Galapagos straddle the equator, and technically, occasionally, some Galapagos penguins possibly forage in the sea just north of the equator. So I'll leave that to you to argue at your next trivia. In the Antarctic Peninsula, the region we're visiting, are chinstrap penguins, and we hope to see chinstrap penguins in our voyage. Here's a lovely, cute little penguin chick, and you'll note it's a small penguin chick, and that's because it's still young enough that it hasn't gotten dirty. This is the penguin chick photo you never see in the calendars, but this is very typical of a penguin chick during the breeding season because they're growing up, but they're not going to change their feathers for 2 months. And they also don't go into the sea to wash because down feathers are not good at insulating in water. They're great in the air, but they don't help in the water. So these birds are going to wear whatever mud or guano or whatever they get on them for the full 2 months. These birds are very healthy, by the way. The ones in the picture here, they're doing fine. They just look, not very cut. The Gen 2 penguin is one I think we're highly likely to see. They're found in Falklands and Malvinas, but also in a couple of places in the Beagle Channel near Ushuaia and in the Antarctic Peninsula. And like all the penguins, they feed their chicks by direct regurgitation, where they vomit up food directly into the mouth of the chick. It kind of looks like they're biting the heads off their babies, but don't worry, they do still grow to maturity. And the basic penguin for most people's imagination is the Adelie penguin. Simple, black and white, and this bird is found only in the Antarctic and all around the Antarctic, all parts. Now I'm going to walk through a little bit of the breeding life of these penguins, and we're looking out of a helicopter here about 4,000 feet up. And to the practiced eye, you can see the penguin colonies because they're a different color from the basic rock. And that different color is the pinkish tone that you're seeing in the mid-foreground there. If it's plain tan rock, that's just rock, but the pinkish stuff, that's penguin guano. Krill, that shrimp-like crustacean that they eat, has a pink pigment in it. And the penguin gut does not process that, so it passes out with the feces. And penguins keep coming back to the same colony year after year, century after century. And so in the Antarctic environment where that's not decomposing very quickly, it leaves a layer of guano with a pink color to it. And so you can spot a penguin colony from quite a long ways away. You can also smell them from a long way away too. I'm sorry, I couldn't figure out a way to bring that odor into the room here, but something to look forward to. These are claw marks in rock by penguins who have walked up this same path for years, decades, centuries. And because of that, their claws have etched into this quartzite rock. They are creatures of habit. And most of the penguins like to nest in groups with other members of the same species. They like to be together, but not too close. The idea is that you take a space and you defend that space. But if I'm nesting here and I can bite you if you're my neighbor and I can bite you without getting up from my nest, I'm going to bite you. And the same vice versa. And so what you find is the penguins all end up being about just out of deep range from one another. We tested that very scientifically. Just by putting a penguin toy on the edge of a colony, it was very quickly savaged. Where a penguin nests has big implications. These penguins have chosen poorly because they've got a creek running through their colony now. Meltwater from the glacier behind, not shown in the picture. But it also shows you why a penguin has nests. In the Antarctic, penguin nests are not about cushioning, they're not about insulation, they're about a raised platform. Giving your eggs a chance, and then your chicks, to sit in something that's not the lowest point where meltwater or snow is going to accumulate. Sometimes, of course, the nest just isn't high enough. In this case, these birds fail to breed by summer. Penguins also nest in places that seem weird to us. They walk with those seemingly small legs, waddling and stuff. You'd think they'd come out of the water and nest right on the beach. And they don't do that, though, because there's usually snow right on the beach at the beginning of the summer. When you visit a place like this, and in the time of year we'll be seeing things, it seems odd because there's all of this open real estate with no penguins. Why did they do the long walk to the top of this little hill? And it's because when they came ashore in October, the top of this little hill didn't have any snow on it, and every place else did. You can see it happening here in the early November photo. The birds in the foreground here, they're sitting there waiting. They won't lay their eggs on the snow. They have to be on solid ground. But the birds that are on that little ridge in the background, well, they're getting possibly a 3 or 4 week head start. and it's a very short summer, so you want to start as soon as you can. Similar photos from the same place, 10 days apart. And the top photo, basically look at where the red square is the exact spot in both photos. And the takeaway is that the bottom photo, 10 days later, has quite a significant amount more of bare ground shown. Now, the basic family unit of penguins that we talk about is a mated pair. And when we do a census of penguins, we don't count individual birds, we count mated pairs. For all the species, the males and females look the same, with slight differences. The males are usually a little bit taller, a tiny bit heavier, maybe their beak is a wee bit longer. But it's very hard to tell, and if you haven't been spending time in a colony really seeing a lot of birds, it's hard to make that judgment call. But the thing about penguin parents is you need 2 parents to raise the chicks. And you're going to be doing 3 main jobs. These will probably seem very familiar to you. Guarding, you've got to keep predators away, like skuas here. And of course, the penguins are going to sit tight and just guard their little spot. You've got to keep your eggs and your chick warm, protected from blizzards and such. And you've got to deliver food to them. And you can't do all of those things by yourself as a penguin parent. Because let's say I'm out getting food to bring back to feed my chick. Well, I'm obviously not guarding and I'm not warming that chick while I'm out getting food. So my partner needs to be there on the desk to do those things while I'm bringing food back. And both male and females swap out those duties quite equally. These 2 penguin chicks are already locked in mortal combat because they are competing for food from their parents' mouth. And so they're jockeying for position as they beg for food. And the one in front in this photo is winning because he or she, and you can't tell the difference at this stage, he or she has boxed out the sibling, pushed it back in where it can't get its head up to get a clear delivery of food. And what happens is the penguin parent will feed the chick that begs best. They don't divvy it out equally. If you beg better, you get more food. And of course, if you get more food, you grow a little faster, you get a little taller, it makes it even easier to outcompete your sibling. And pretty soon, if there's not a lot of food around, one penguin chick will wither and starve to death. But in years when there's a lot of food available, the bird that begs well gets its fill, falls asleep, has a nap, and the parent still has some food available and will feed the one bird that doesn't beg quite so well. And in those years, both chicks will be reared. Now, as they get a little older, they get a little more demanding for food. Here, the penguin has found its mom has come back and is now chasing it, begging for food. And the reason that this bird, the adult here, is running away from its chick is that just out of frame here, there's another couple of chicks chasing because the penguin chicks, they'll beg from any adult. They don't care, they just want food and they'll beg from anything. But the parents will only feed their own chicks. And they're really aggressive to those that are not their chicks. They can tell the difference, it's remarkable, by their call. And I've spent months sitting there huddled watching penguins and taking observations and hearing these little cheap begging calls. And for a human, they're all the same. But penguins can tell the difference. So at a certain stage, when the chicks are old enough to be able to maintain their own body temperature, where they've got some good down coat on them and a little bit of blubber showing up now, they can sit and wait while both parents go to sea to bring food back in shorter intervals. And at this stage, the penguin chicks are just kind of sitting around waiting for meals. Yeah, some of them more successful than others. On a cold day, the penguin chicks from that same area tend to huddle together in a scrum like this to share body heat. But if it's a warm day, they'll spread out. Now this is, I say warm day, this is probably 40 degrees Fahrenheit, say 3 or 4 degrees Celsius. There was no wind that day. Of course, the sun was shining, and these birds super well insulated, and they're trying to cool off. So they're lying like this to use their feet as radiators. They get off their feet, flush blood through there, and lose some body heat that way. Now, as they grow, they start to try to rub off the down, because as I said before, down, great insulator from air, horrible in the water. And this bird, you see, is molting the down as the first year feathers are growing in, and they tend to rub it off wherever they can reach. Obviously, the head is one of the tricky spots. If you're a penguin chick, you have to worry about predators basically from the time you're an egg. In the Antarctic, for example, there's a thing called skua. In the temperate areas, there are falcons, there are foxes, there are all kinds of dangers for the chicks. And to take the skua as an example, this is a predatory gull-like bird, got a nice hook on the beak there. And they often will attack in pairs, here's two trying to get at this chinstrap penguin nest. Now here's the beauty of the sit-tight defense, because if the penguin were to get up to chase one of these skuas, well, clearly the other one is going to just be able to waltz over and grab the chicks. So no, they sit tight and defend what they can reach without getting up. In this case, they were successful at driving off the predators, but of course that's not always the case. The skuas are effective. They take the penguin chicks and they do clean them up pretty well, because of course they've got chicks to feed too. And if there's anybody here in public relations who wants a real challenge, it would be to rehabilitate the public opinion about skuas. Because of course they eat cute penguin chicks, but they're just as an important part of the Antarctic ecosystem. Now, in the water, it's a different story. The chicks have to worry about predators on land and in the water, but the adults who have been feeling pretty safe on land have to worry when they go into the sea. And of course they have to go into the sea because that's where all their food is. There's a leopard seal just in front of the ice here. Here's the one with the mouth open to show you why you don't want to just jump in the water. There's a leopard seal around. Leopard seals do eat penguins. There's a lot of dramatic footage about it. It's not the main part of their diet, but they do eat penguins when they can. They've got quite a large mouth on them. And so they're often patrolling the beaches near penguin colonies because, of course, the penguins have to commute out to sea to get food. In fact, you often find that the penguins come up to the beach or the edge of the ice and they don't just immediately jump in. They get there and they wait. And then other penguins come and wait with them. And more come, and eventually you get this critical mass of penguins and they all go pouring off. It was written or drawn for me like this by some kindergartners who I gave a talk to about penguins. This was on their thank you card. And I think they nailed it pretty well, except they've given each penguin its own ice floe, which is very generous of them. This is the photo that got them thinking like that. The penguins are coming out en masse, and the idea is that if you're jumping in the water and there's a predator there, you know, if you come in with 40 of your neighbors, the chances of you being the one eaten are reduced. Now here's a bird that did get bitten, and surprisingly, given the size of the leopard seal mouth, it was not fatally bitten. It managed to get away, it came back ashore and hung around our camp for a few days, and healed up, and then went back out to sea, where of course it has to, because that's where all the food is. Now, penguins live, for the most part, in places that people don't. And so many species are free from direct impacts from human civilization. There's a few places in the world where they've been eaten or their eggs were consumed and stuff. That's barely happening anywhere these days. They're often found on islands that don't get large developments and such. But in different places, they do face different threats. And in fact, out of the formally recognized 18 species, 13 of them are currently considered threatened or in worse shape than most. For some, like the Magellanic penguin in South America, their numbers are declining because of changes in how much food they can get during the winter months when they're feeding off the coast of Argentina. Or they're swimming in some of the shipping lanes off the east coast of South America, and they often become fouled with oil that's been spilled, and that kills them by reducing the waterproofness of their feather. But in some places, it's not even a question of those indirect impacts, it's something even more esoteric, like a change in the climate. Now this scenario in the Antarctic, what you see here, that's a lot of ice in the water, and that's great from most penguins' perspective, because ice is a wonderful habitat under which to grow penguin food. And without going into the whole food web here, there's a lot of marine algae, the phytoplankton, and that gets eaten by krill and small fish, and they in turn get eaten by penguins. So this kind of seascape is great because it means a lot of room for the growth of the food source. But the distribution of ice is not consistent around the continent. So if we just look at the Adelie penguins, all those orange dots on the coastline, each one is a penguin colony. The areas circled in green are growing at the moment. Numbers are increasing. But in the red circle, they are decreasing. And what's happening basically is a change in the food availability as a result of warming temperatures. The Antarctic Peninsula, that area in red, which is where we're headed, is warming much faster than the rest of Antarctica. And that's impacting on the Adelie penguin populations there. More dramatically, just last year, a study was published that showed a catastrophic loss of emperor penguins in one corner of the Antarctic. This map is showing you sea ice anomalies from 13 months ago. And the blue areas, the bluer the area you see, the more ice there is compared to the average amount of sea ice. And the redder the areas, that means the less, how much less ice there is compared to the mean. And for the most part, you can see there's one blue zone, but I want to zoom in on Bellingshausen Sea there, circled the darkest red on the zone. Because there's a group of emperor penguin colonies nesting down there, and they were affected by the change in the sea ice conditions. Emperor penguins nest on the sea ice, not on land. So they're nesting on a solid bit of ice that's generally protected and connected to the mainland. So it survives the winter and the springtime. And it's a very convenient place to breed because it's close to the waterfront where you get all the food. But of course, it's vulnerable to the loss of ice. And in this part of the Antarctic coast, this is the Antarctic Peninsula landmass that you see here, and where we'll be visiting is kind of off to the top right-hand corner of this photo. Those different names, Rothschild Island, Verdi Peninsula, etc., those are the names of emperor penguin colonies. And all of them failed to raise any chicks last year. And the reason for that is that the ice disappeared early, while the chicks were still wearing down coats, and therefore not waterproof, and therefore unable to survive being immersed in the Southern Ocean. These two photos are of the exact same area. On the left, inside that little circle, you see a dark smudge at the very middle of the circle. That is the penguin colony as seen by satellite photo. And if you look at the icebergs that are casting shadows there, those icebergs are in the exact same positions in the right-hand side photo. The black that you see in the right-hand photo, all of that black area is open water. So over the course of 2 months, this ice has all disappeared. And this is a crucial time for it to disappear because the chicks are not waterproof at that stage of their lives. And so close to 10,000 chicks died as a result of this change in sea ice. Now these kind of changes, well, they're unprecedented. We haven't seen them before. But as the trend continues with warming down there, we may see this sort of thing happening again. And it's why it's very challenging to take a bird like penguins that are so well adapted to live in harsh environment to withstand the cold,
to make a living in a place that we can't imagine it. When suddenly the conditions turn to look something like this, that's not a good thing for them. It's beautiful for us, bluebird day, but not a great place to live if you're counting one thing being very cold. Now, the penguins around the world continue to enthrall people. I know many of you are looking forward to doing an excursion in the next few days. We are able to see penguins on excursions in Puerto Madryn, in Punta Arenas, in Ushuaia, in Stanley, and also from the ship itself, as our expedition leader, Dr. Norman Laska, mentioned earlier this morning with the introductions. If you've got binoculars, please bring them with you when you go out on deck. It'll help bring things in closer. But we're already in the zone of penguins. So as we approach the port tomorrow, for example, those of you who spend time out on deck might get a chance to see Magellanic penguins porpoising along in the water. So it's time to get excited about penguins, even if you're one of the 2 or 3 people who did raise your hand and said you hated them. I hope you'll at least appreciate them a little bit more from this presentation. Thanks very much.